So you want to buy a first gen Cadillac CTS-V. Alright, so I'm going to walk around my car and show you guys what to look out for, because I just recently bought this car and I went through the same process that you guys are going through right now about what to look out for, and uh, pretty much just like an overall, like the flaws of the first gens, and like how you can find cars with certain fixes on them, like the 8.8 rear end, which you're going to have to pay a little bit more for those cars, versus a car that still has the factory diff, which, I mean, it's not a horrible diff. I mean, it sucks, but it can be fixed for the most part. But I'll get into that later. But don't let all the horror stories about the diff kind of scare you away from a stock car. But if you have the extra money or don't care to buy something modded, then go for a car that's been built with an 8.8, because it's still a fantastic option. But most cars with 8.8s, they have a lot higher price tags, which makes sense because the rear end itself from Creative Steel is $4,000. So anyway, I'm gonna go over the first thing to look out for when you buy these cars is the 2004 and 2005 models. Apparently these cars have mine's a 2005. These are the LS6 cars, the last of the LS6 engine, in GM in general for any car. But these cars had weaker rear ends. The diffs, the case is actually not as rigid. It's not as strong. So the pinion snout on them actually will snap, and that's a common issue with these cars. No matter, if it's a 2004, 2005, all the way up to 2007 of the first gen. The way the rear ends are set up on these cars is that the diff bushings, there's two in the back that support the rear diff, and there's one offset diff bushing in the front. And it's kind of a weak point because the bushing in it is a very soft rubber, and when this car torques up, especially when you have about 400 foot-pounds on it, the pinion will skyrocket up, and it puts all that stress on that front bushing. So what happens is the car will probably wheel hop if you're getting on it, especially with traction control on. That's one thing I always turn off when I drive this car. But with traction control on, the car will wheel hop, then all that stress will go straight to that front diff bushing, and the actual housing around the snout right there in the front of the pinion will actually snap, and the whole case will crack in two. So one thing to look out for when you drive these cars is just listen to any type of rear end noise. If you drive the car and hear it clunky when you change gears, it's more than likely it has a worn out factory front diff bushing. And an easy fix for that is the Creative Steel race bushing. It's the red bushing. On my car, I went with the red bushing and the diff block. They say you can just run the red bushing by itself. I like the extra firmness with both, so I highly recommend doing that. The car, it doesn't eliminate wheel hop completely, but it does help a lot, and it keeps that pinion from skyrocketing and bouncing up and down, which cause premature case failure. So I think the block and the diff bushing together, it was under $100, so it's a pretty cheap fix, and it's an extra, peace of mind. But that's pretty much the biggest flaw with these cars, especially the 04 and 05, because they have the first gen case. But I'm not saying that the second and third gen cases are any better, because they're not. But they are just a little bit more rigid. And a lot of people do like a V2 cradle swap and everything, but you can actually get cradle bushings, the polyurethane, or you can get the Creative Steel aluminum ones, which prevent any cradle movement at all, which kind of eliminates like the whole point of independent rear suspension. It just kind of firms everything up. So you're kind of giving up a little bit of ride quality and comfort and sound when you do that, but it's either comfort versus reliability. It depends how you drive your car. So if you're going to go out and beat your car, take it to the track, then it is 100% worth it to go through the aluminum rear cradle bushings. They're a little bit expensive, I think $350, but then again, it's $350 versus a new diff. So Anyway, another common issue with these cars, they have a 2-piece drive shaft. They are serviceable. It says they're not, but they are. The carrier bushing, that actually is the bushing that kind of connects both drive shafts, tend to go bad. The car will whine. You'll think it's rear end noise, but it's not. So if a car is making a whining sound when you're driving it, and it sounds like it's coming underneath the gear shifter, that is a carrier bushing. You could actually get a Voodoo Chicken polyurethane bushing. They actually have a full service where you can box your drive shaft up, ship it to them, they will replace it for you, or you can buy their do-it-yourself kit and you know, just drop a drive shaft. I mean, if you have a bearing press, you can do it yourself. It's not that difficult. So that's another huge upgrade. I would highly recommend doing that, and the rear end bushings if you have a factory rear diff on these cars. The LS2 and LS6 engines are both bulletproof. They're both good engines. Don't let people, you know, sway you which engine's better than the other. They're both great engines. LS2 does have more low-end pep, but this car, I'm keeping it stock for the most part. It's my daily for now. And I'm just going to do, you know, minor cosmetic stuff to it. And I'm just going to do, like, productive, I should say, upgrades, like the bushings and all of that good stuff. Eventually I'll do the cradle bushings and stuff, but as far as leaving a car stock, LS2 versus LS6, you're not going to see that much of a difference performance-wise. The LS2 likes to rev, LS6 likes to rev out, and the LS2's got more of a low-end grunt all the way across the power band. One issue I know most of these cars have, electronic-wise, are the sunroofs. If you can actually find one without a sunroof, that would be cool. But if it is a must for you, usually the switches and stuff don't work. As far as electronics, that's about all I can really say about that. These cars, factory, have what they call a DIC system. It's the navigation, radio, all that good stuff. Let me walk over to the driver's side, get inside the car, and show you what I'm talking about. This right here is kind of like your control center. But one thing you have to look out for when you're buying a used car is let's see, let me skip that. Is making sure all your TPS sensors work, because that's what controls your traction control and stability track. It lets them work properly. If either one of the sensors are bad, then I don't think you can use traction control or stability track. The only fix is to either get new sensors, calibrate them, and make sure they're all within within tolerance as far as PSI range. Like if one wheel is a lot lower than the other, that would disable the features of the traction control and stability track. But anyway, most people, if they lose one tire pressure sensor, they will actually just pull all of them out and throw them away, and that will bring the traction control system and stability track back online. It's just you either have to have them all working properly or have them completely deleted, and that's one thing to look out for with a used car, is making sure that all the sensors are calibrated and they do work. As far as this right here, the factory navigation and stuff like that is about useless. You don't have many options of removing this stuff and putting in like an aftermarket radio, because you will lose all the these features right here. If that's a big deal to everybody here, all this right here, I don't think you can put that in the aftermarket radio. So that's one downside of these cars, but you know, you can always get like a Bluetooth cigarette lighter adapter thing. 2004-2005 also had ground issues with certain sensors, like the oil pressure sensor or the temperature sensor. I'm guessing any sensor really, they have bad grounds. The grounds can go bad, and it causes your sensors to short out and skyrocket, like, and read wrong. So if a car, for some reason, if you're driving and it says the oil temperature is like maxed out, don't worry, it's a ground issue. It's very common, especially with the 2004 2005 model Vs. Other than that, I mean, for the most part, these cars are absolutely bulletproof. I mean, a lot of people are scared, you know, the Cadillac name, it's going to be expensive to work on, stuff like that, but well, this is technically just a Corvette with 4 doors. All the engine upgrades and mods are extremely cheap. One thing I have to say, I guess the headlight ballast, but you can delete them and go with a LED kit off eBay, or you can just wire up your own ballast and stuff on these cars. That's with any first-gen model. But just make sure they work or don't flick or anything when you drive the car. Again, mine's an LS6 engine. And of course, just do your typical walk around with the car. With any car, it's not specific to CTS-V. Just make sure the engine sounds good. There's no smoke, no oil leaks, nothing like that. And check the interior. Just make sure it's clean. It's not a common issue if you had a competent owner that actually took care of the car. Like mine, the previous owner really took care of this car. I have a stack of receipts in the glove box where he took this car and had all the work done to it, which is pretty good. One thing that's pretty common on these cars, the lips are usually always busted or scratched. If cosmetic issues don't bother you, then you can overlook that. My front lip is perfect. I just painted that just to give this car a little bit more contrast. Then I also done the daytime running light mod. I pulled the actual module out and I cut the solder point. I can always resolder it back if I sell the car, but that's one thing I done to this car. I deleted that, as I hate those orange lights. They look so bad. And again, just make sure all electronics in the car works when you go and look at it. I really haven't heard of many issues, like as far as like CTS-V one versus the world, like the Facebook groups with these cars. You never really hear complaints about electronics on these cars, like the window motor's going bad. You never hear about that. All mine work. They work good. They're fast. You know, most cars, like my Firebird, that thing, even with brand new window motors, were slow as dirt. Usually on those groups, and from what I've learned and researched before I bought this car, it's always just the rear end issues is that you have to look out for. And again, like if you find a car that has been maintained, or the owner didn't beat on it from red light to red light, or do any crazy burnouts, or these cars, you have to watch out. A really hard first to second shift can really torque up that rear end and snap it. So as long as you drive the car and it's not clunking real crazy during shifts and stuff like that, then I wouldn't stress about the rear end too much. Like I said, do the bushings. If the car already has the bushings and the cradle bushings, perfect. That's less work for you in the future. Like I said, this car was bone stock when I got it, so I had to do all that stuff myself. Or the cradle bushings will be something I'm going to do in the future. But I'm going to drive the car and feel the clutch of it. Most of these cars, people do a LS7 swap. So these cars from the factory have a dual mass clutch, and you have to buy a spacer for the LS7 clutch to kind of make up for that added space in the flywheel where these cars were dual mass. So just make sure that when you drive it, the clutch is good. There's no weird sounds, no weird clanks, anything like that. So if it does have an LS7 clutch, make sure that you use that spacer, or you're going to have some issues with that. But right now, I'm just kind of going through the gears and usually like when you let off the clutch or change into gear, if the car clunks or something like that, it could be a sign of, like I said, the drive shaft carrier bushing or the pin in gear. So, and the stock clutch, like if I still have that dual mass clutch in this car, then they can be kind of clunky too. But don't let that scare you. It's nothing major. It's just the way these cars are. But for the most part, like if you want a pretty powerful four-door daily, I mean, don't expect to get crazy gas mileage in these cars because it's a V8, it's an LS car. Don't hesitate to buy one. I mean, I bought this thing, you know, kind of really scared about the rear end issues and stuff like that, but they're kind of overblown. Well, I wouldn't say they're overblown, but they're, the people that buy these cars buy them and expect them to be like a built Camaro with a 9-inch rear end that they can take to the strip and just beat the living piss out of it and expect it to hold up, and that's not the case because GM was cheap, reused the V6 rear ends from the regular CTS and slapped underneath these cars. So, but like I said, finding one that was well maintained, well owned, and find one with a Hurst short throw shifter if you can, because these right here are pretty long throw shifters. Let me turn this dome light on. It didn't really help that much, but as you can see, look at these throws on this car here. And that's something else to look out for. Make sure all the gears are there. When I was in the market looking for these cars, it seemed like every CTS-V had some sort of synchro issue. Like 6th gear would pop out, 5th gear would pop out, 4th gear grinds. Just make sure that it goes into every gear. And as you can see, like I said, the stock shifter leaves a lot to be desired. I mean, it's got a lot of play in it. But, you know, just do your typical research when you buy this car. You know, like I'm trying to go over the highlights of what to look out for. But again, it's up to you. Like when you see the car, to make sure it's what you want. And let me turn this car off and walk around it some more. It's up to you ultimately to find a car that you want, and you know it matches your budget and is in good shape. You know, like this car, I drove 3 hours to get it. It was worth every penny I gave for it. It was worth the drive. This thing was a blast driving back. It's comfortable. I mean, it is a Cadillac after all, first and foremost. The brakes are phenomenal on these cars for factory brakes. These are, they say they're Brembos, but I don't see any Brembo labeling on them, but you can actually get these off Amazon. The calipers are super cheap. So for Brembos, it's a cheap replacement, especially for performance brakes. Another downside of the first gen Vs is this 6-lug pattern. It's really difficult to find aftermarket wheels. Well, I wouldn't say difficult, but they are very expensive. And they're usually like 20s, and 18s look the best on these cars. Like I think 20s look ridiculous, and the factory wheels don't look bad at all. I actually love the way they look, especially when you paint them or have them powder coated. Mine are powder coated dark metal gray or gunmetal gray, and when the car is actually moving on the road, like you just see those silver calipers, and they look really good going down the road. But, I mean, to get your foot in the door with the Cadillac CTS-V, the first gens, again, are the cheapest ones. And again, they're naturally aspirated versus, like, the newer ones, and they're only in 6 speeds. That's the only transmission option these cars were offered. So they're cool. You're buying, kind of like, I guess, like a piece of, like, Cadillac's performance history right here with the first-gen V, as this is like a new thing in the market when it came out. You know, like it only had a little bit of competition. It was like the Chrysler 300C SRT8, and then the rest of the as far as American competition, that's all it really had. And you know, this thing was really to compete with like Audi and BMW and everything with their M series and stuff like that. But Like I said, drive the car, check the rear end, make sure there's no leaks coming out of the diff either. Again, just drive it, listen for any clunks or whines, and if you hear that whine coming from underneath the gear shifter and console, you know it's a carrier bearing. Don't let it scare you. That's fine. They make different sounds. The carrier bearing is more of a high-pitched like squeal, and then pinion whines are more like a deep hum, you know. And both sounds will kind of increase with speed. So just make sure you get on YouTube and look up different videos of each, you know, symptom. That way you can tell a difference between the sounds of a pinion whine or a carrier bearing whine. But that's basically all you really need to look out for. Is just abuse. Like if you buy a car off a young kid that looks like he would have abused it, check the rear fender wells to make sure they're not caked in rubber, so they haven't been doing any crazy burnouts or anything like that. Or if like the engine bay look kind of, you know, it has cheap mods, like a dirty, ragged out looking air filter, stuff like that. You know, just kind of question how it was treated. And just kind of look at the owner and, you know, talk to him, ask him about the maintenance and stuff, and just ask them simple questions like what oil they used, what oil intervals, excuse me, they went through when they were changing the oil, what brand. Most people, if they're real quick to reply to you, first like, I don't really know, you know, I took this car to some lube tech at Walmart. Then, you know, you kind of question like their mechanical abilities. I wouldn't say it would ultimately be a deal breaker, but you can tell a lot from the owner, like about his how he cares about his car with what brand oil they use. Like most people that really care about their cars are diehard Pennzoil owners or Mobil One. They have their, you know, particular brand, their particular weight, what coolant they use, and specifically this and that only. You can kind of tell that's someone that cares about their car because they want to give it what they think is the best, even though most name brand oils are all pretty good. But that's just some things I would do, you know, talk to the owner and kind of ask them why they're getting rid of the car. You know, hey man, why are you getting rid of this thing? Are you upgrading? If they might be getting another car, they might be wanting more money to go with a newer model maybe. But if they're just like, nah, you know, if their excuse doesn't really seem legit, then that kind of, you know, question like if you're buying their money pit or something like that, or if you're buying their headache, because you don't want to get in a mess, especially something like this. They can get expensive. Even if an LS motor is cheap to build and work on, you don't want to buy something that's going to blow up on you. But again, like I said, I will not let the rear end issues scare you. Just make sure when you buy these cars, treat it like a Cadillac. Don't treat it like a Corvette or anything like that. I mean, yeah, they have power. Use that on the interstate. Roll race if you have to. But don't be too crazy with that first or second gear or burnouts or anything like that with the stock rear end, unless you get that rear end kind of beefed up with those cradle bushings and diff bushings and stuff. But yeah, anyway, this is my 2005, and again, I appreciate you guys for watching, and let me know if I've missed anything or anything you guys would like to add if you're a fellow V1 owner yourself. Just comment below what you would look out for, and you know, maybe something I overlooked or forgot to mention. But yeah, anyway, thanks for watching, everyone.